Welcome to the morning breakout session. This session is titled My Support, Making Choice Possible for All, and is presented by Ari Neiman. Ari is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of My Support. I invite you to read his full bio in the program book. With that, I will turn it over to our presenter.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be back at the Coleman Institute conference. This presentation is something I'm very excited about, in part because 3 years ago at the 2014 Coleman Institute conference, I had the pleasure of presenting on My Support at the very beginning of the project, when the platform was little more than some screenshots, a hope, and a prayer. Since then, over the last 3 years, we've built My Support into a thriving online community, active in 4 states and soon to be live in 6. And I'm excited for the chance to talk with you all about what we're doing to help leverage online technologies to support an expansion in self-directed services. I'm just going to start by giving a brief overview of why we built this project. First, there's been a lot of discussion in the popular media and in Washington about rising healthcare costs and an effort to try and control costs in healthcare. And this is something that we in the disability community have reason to be very concerned by. Often, conversations on healthcare costs are framed just in terms of cuts, when in reality, if we want to make transitions towards both higher quality and more sustainable healthcare, we need to support transitions to do the kinds of things that have always been priorities of the disability rights movement. Transitioning people with disabilities and seniors out of institutional settings and into residences in the community where people have more choice and control over their own lives. We know that the 3.6 million people who on Medicaid, who use long-term services and supports, make up 43% of Medicaid costs. And so because of that significant disparity, our community is a significant driver of Medicaid expenditures. States are very interested in ways to help facilitate quicker transitions towards the community and towards what we know is higher quality and what they're prioritizing as lower cost. One of the ways that's happening is through the rise of self-direction. Many of you are familiar with self-directed service models, whereas in an agency model, people with disabilities have workers sent to their home by an agency, typically selected by an agency, employed by an agency. Self-directed services lets people with disabilities choose their own workers, often act as the employer of record, and as a result have more choice and control. And unsurprisingly, a wide array of research shows that when people self-direct, they're less likely to end up in a nursing home or institution. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation did broad-based cash and counseling studies on self-direction, found as much as an 18% reduction in nursing home admissions among the population of people with disabilities who are self-directing. They tend to be happier with their services, and that's not a surprise. You get more choices, you tend to be happier about what you're getting. And then they tend to have improved quality of life and health outcomes. So self-direction is really a win-win-win. And the research we have shows that in general, the majority of seniors and the majority of people with disabilities express an interest in exploring self-directed service models. Despite that, across the country, there's tremendous variation in the availability of self-direction. We see about a half of the approximately 1 million people who are self-directing in the state of California through their in-home supportive services program. Many parts of the country have little to no self-directed services, or may maintain robust self-directed options for some populations, but not for others. Often states may have access to a large self-directed population for people with physical disabilities, but not for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, or vice versa. So we have this service that we know works, that we know has improvements in quality and cost, but we also know that large parts of the country are not making use of it. And so we ask ourselves, why? Why is that? And about 4 years ago, a collection of national leaders in the disability community, people like Steve Eitelman, Val Bradley, Nancy Thaler, Kathy Anderson, many others, came together to try and answer that question. What could we do to help make self-directed services, where people get to choose their own workers, the norm rather than the exception? And the big obstacle that we found that people continue to face, it's not a surprise, is that it's hard to hire people. It's difficult to hire people when you can offer great pay and benefits. It's even more difficult when you can only offer what Medicaid rates will allow you to give direct support workers for people with disabilities. Increasingly, states are trying to address this problem through what's called a matching service registry. And there are a wide variety of different matching service registries. Basically, they're tools that people with disabilities and seniors can use to connect to potential workers, sometimes via internet interface, an online interface, sometimes via phone or going to an in-person office, sometimes by connecting to a state agency or a health plan. CMS at the federal level has been encouraging the growth of matching services registries. Last year in August, CMS issued guidance indicating that states can take a match, receive federal funding for the development of matching services registries. And in part as a result of these kinds of changes and the recognition that if we're going to help people self-direct, pick their own workers, we need to be giving them some infrastructure, some support. We built the My Support platform to help meet that need. I'm going to walk you through My Support and just show you a little bit about how it works and tell you about our experiences deploying it in California, New York, Iowa, and Virginia, and we're currently getting ready for deployments in Maryland and Tennessee. My Support begins with something very familiar to anybody who's ever used Facebook or online dating. I think that's probably most people in this room, at least Facebook. And that's a profile. People with disabilities, either on their own or with the help of family members or other people in their circle of support, fill out information about themselves, indicating things like if they smoke, if they need an accessible van, their communication support needs, the languages they speak, if they own pets, and other things designed to speak to who they are and what they might require in a support relationship. After that, the platform prompts people to indicate information about what kinds of services they want, what they're looking for in a worker, what they want and what they've had good and bad experiences with in support relationships. And people reflect all kinds of things here. Sometimes folks talk about that support worker they had who ended up becoming a roommate and they ended up having a very intimate personal relationship with them. They became their best friend. Sometimes they talk about that worker who ended up stealing from them, or instances of fraud or abuse or exploitation. One young man, when we were rolling out in Northern California, put in his profile that he wanted a support worker who was a San Francisco Giants fan and under no circumstances an Oakland A's fan. So we see all kinds of things reflected in the profile, but the goal here is to give both people with disabilities and workers who also create profiles a chance to articulate who they are in a support relationship, so that when you look at a worker's profile, if you're a person with a disability, or when you look at a person with a disability's profile, if you're a worker, you have a sense from day one, is this somebody who it's worth my time to sit down for an interview with, who might be a good fit for a long-term relationship? After completing a profile, both people with disabilities and workers are asked to answer a series of questions about values they bring into a support relationship. We've realized that too many registries treat the job of self-direction as just putting a warm body in the right place at the right time. And in reality, it's more than that. If we want support relationships to succeed, we need to give people a chance to articulate what kinds of values and personality matter to them. So let me share with you a few of our match questions that go into our matching algorithm. Your worker thinks you are making bad decisions. Which of these behaviors are appropriate for them? A, nothing. It's my life and not their business. Raise your hand if you would answer A. Okay, we've got one for A. B, talk to me about it. I want to hear their feedback. All right, we've got a lot of folks for B. And then C, talk with my friends and family and get their involvement. Oh, we got one for C. Okay, great. Two for C, okay. The platform allows you to indicate a first choice response, indicate how important the answer is to you, provide some additional context and a second choice response. And the goal here is to let you articulate what your own personal, person-centered definition of quality is. Let me show you one more match question. This one happens to be my favorite, so I always pull it out for these kinds of presentations. You and your worker sit down at a restaurant. The server comes by and asks your worker what you want to order. That's something that's definitely happened to some people in this room, I can see. Very common experience for many people with disabilities. Being talked past to, being condescended to. How would you want them to respond? Correct the server and tell them to talk to you instead? That's what I would want. Pretend they didn't hear them? Some people would prefer that. Don't like confrontation. Or order for you. Now there's no right or wrong answer for everyone. But each person has a right and wrong answer for them. And using these match questions, My Support is to assign a compatibility score between each person with a disability and each worker on the platform. So when you search for a worker who has a certain skill set, or who's available within a certain geographic distance, or who is available at a certain time of day, or speaks a certain language, or any number of other variations, you don't just get a list of names and contact information. You get a list of profiles ranked in order of likelihood of the particular person seeking support, finding that worker to be a good match. You can look at that worker's profile. You can look at how they answered match questions. You can send them a message using our internal messaging system. You can look at their schedule and see when they might be available, if they have any blocks of unavailable time. And so the platform is really designed to help you find a worker that best matches your needs. And one of the things we discovered when we first deployed in the San Francisco Bay Area in 2015 is that because there are so many different potential employment relationships that people may enter into, sometimes folks are going to be involved in a straight up self-directed service model where they have a fiscal intermediary that's supporting them and is responsible for doing background checks. Sometimes folks are still going to be supported by an agency that's doing in-home respite or supported living. We needed to add another component to the provider directory. And that's the ability to keep track of background checks that workers have had that allow them to perform services in a given program. So for example, if I'm only looking for workers that have had a background check that lets them deliver services in California's IHSS program, In-Home Supportive Services program, I can filter for that. If I'm affiliated with an agency, let's say I'm getting services, I'm getting supported living from an ARC chapter, and I decide that I want to only see workers that have already been hired by the ARC, I can look only for those workers. Or I can look at the broader scope of workers in my area and possibly find someone who isn't yet background checked, isn't yet hired by my agency or FI, and I may want to submit into that process. Now, these background check requirements do a few different things. One, it allows us to verify that workers who have a background check badge, which is reflected in their profile over here, are who they say they are and are authorized to deliver services within a program. But two, it also feeds into our scheduling software, because we quickly discovered that people with disabilities and families, they want to have a fully immersive experience. And so we built scheduling and timesheet software that allows people with disabilities to submit timesheets and schedule workers on the platform, doing things like seeing how many hours they had remaining for a particular category of service, or in budget authority systems, how much remaining budget they had, setting the timing of an upcoming shift, setting its location, and then looking among the workers that you have a relationship with that are authorized to deliver services in that program to find which might be a good fit. And in doing so, you can also see how many hours each of those workers has remaining prior to an overtime obligation. Since, as many of you are aware, in 2013, the Department of Labor imposed time and a half overtime requirements on direct support and home care for the first time. So if, for example, I want to select Janet, who has 0 hours remaining, I'll be informed that I can't select Janet unless I get the approval of an agency to authorize that overtime. If I want to select Jose, I can check Jose's availability and see if he has any conflicts that day that might make it a bad idea for me to hire him. And it looks like he doesn't, and Jose would be a really good fit. I can arrange for text message reminders to get a reminder before a shift takes place. We find that's particularly helpful in making self-direction more accessible to folks with executive functioning challenges. And the platform also allows for timesheets to be submitted on the system, including note-keeping and documentation, service codes, and other components, which can then be retrieved via our report log system, similar to other agency management software like Therap and other things of that nature. I'm going to show you a couple of other things that are kind of cool, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've been deploying this in the states in which we're operating. One thing is, as many of you are aware, I come from a background in the self-advocacy movement. For 10 years, I ran the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Autonomy and choice are really built into this platform at a very basic level. And we also know that there's a growing movement called supported decision-making in this country and globally, trying to give people with disabilities the opportunity to access help in making important decisions about services, finances, medical items, many, many other things, without having to surrender control over the entirety of the decision just because they may need a little help. And so we introduced a function called authorized user into My Support that's designed to help facilitate these kinds of supported decision-making arrangements. Basically, it lets you take a family member or a friend or your case manager or your support broker and give them limited permission access to My Support. So let's say you want to give somebody the ability to view your schedule, but you want to be the only one that gets to edit your schedule. Or you want to give somebody the ability to see your worker matches, but not to respond to messages on the system. You want to be the only one that talks to workers. Or any number of other areas. The platform lets you give customized access to someone in your circle of support and lets them help you to the degree that you feel comfortable with, without surrendering full control. Now, there are a couple of other things I want to highlight. We also have built a back-end interface for My Support, and this does a couple of different things. First, it means that if you are a fiscal intermediary or an agency, you can do things like manage a client's account on their behalf. So if, for example, I click on Edit on Craig P's account, I can go in and manage his account for him and make changes, which is something we found that many agencies who are not delivering fully self-directed services, that may be giving people a chance to create their own profiles, but otherwise may still be maintaining ultimate control over a person's schedule and a responsibility for having workers show up to support them, something that can be very helpful. You can also use the back-end interface to set the number of hours a person is authorized to receive in a given month, and to export timesheet data, as well as to approve or reject workers as having had background checks with a particular agency or a particular public program. Now, over time, we have a couple of other things that we're planning on building into the My Support platform in the coming years. One is we want the ability, as we grow, because we're working with a variety of states and health plans right now, to give real-time analytics on the state of the direct support workforce. We know, and in fact, if you look at the CMS Medicaid Managed Care rule that was issued last year, that states that are moving into managed care have an obligation to measure what's called provider network adequacy, the availability of providers in a given geographic area for long-term services and supports. And since in My Support we have a complete database of the number of workers in an area and their characteristics and the people with disabilities in an area and what they're looking for in workers, we intend to be able to offer real-time analytics to help show if there is or to what extent there is a workforce crisis in an area for, say, workers who speak Spanish or Cantonese, or workers who are available to work in the mornings and are comfortable doing transfer, or any number of other things. We're also in the process of deploying new aspects to our mobile interface. We already have a mobile interface. The majority of folks who use My Support do so using a smartphone, and we're in the process of introducing GPS-based check-in and check-out technology in compliance with the federal EVV mandate to let folks check in and check out of their shifts. But we're hoping to introduce in the near future the capacity for workers to be prompted to answer questions on the state of their client at the end of those shifts. And so what we want to do is to be able to track information on the needs or the challenges or the progress that people with disabilities are facing, mostly in agency-directed services. This is less relevant for self-direction, over time in a way that can then be fitted into the individual person-centered planning process in subsequent years. Now, we first deployed this in California in 2015, and currently we now have a contract with the Golden Gate Regional Center, which is picking up the cost of My Support for individuals receiving supported living and independent living services. We're in talks with several other regional centers, which manage developmental disability services in the state of California. And we're supporting over 100 individuals with disabilities in the Bay Area to access the My Support platform, find workers, and coordinate them over time. Some in a fully self-directed model, some in an agency-directed model. We've also formed a relationship with Anthem, the country's second largest health insurer, and we're working with them first in Iowa, and now we're in the process of deploying in Virginia. Anthem is a Medicaid managed care organization, and we are providing access to My Support to Anthem members who choose to self-direct their own services. And we're currently in the process of deploying in New York's developmental disability service system, and we'll shortly be deploying in Tennessee and Maryland. In Tennessee, populations, in Maryland for people with developmental disabilities. We're really very excited about this. We think it has the opportunity to significantly expand the use of self-direction across the country. I want to thank you all very much for your time, and I think I'll save the last 10 minutes for questions. Thank you. I'm sorry, what was that?
Rocky Mountain Human Services in Denver.
Okay.
And I want to know, I also get services through Laramie. I don't know if you've heard of Laramie Hall or not. And I want to know if an interface would get some of our clients hired, or some of our staff members hired to be host home. You go into that space. Well, first of all, do you go in Colorado?
That's a great question. So I heard two questions there, which was first, are we available in Colorado? And second, do we help connect people with host home providers in addition to shift work? And the answer is we're not yet available in Colorado. We come into a state when we receive a contract either from the state, a health plan, or an agency. So if your agency or your health plan or your state agency wants to talk to us, I'll make sure to leave my card. But we're not yet here in Colorado. We are in the process of exploring providing matching services to host home providers. It's a little bit of a different dynamic in terms of our matching algorithm, which is first and foremost optimized for DSPs that are going to be coming in and out of the home. But we're researching some of the personality compatibility characteristics that make for a good host-home relationship, because we've heard that feedback from a few different sources that what we're doing here may be a good fit for the host-home model as well.
Don't you think this is kind of invasive, interfering with someone? Don't you think this is interfering with someone's privacy? Level of privacy? I mean, sometimes I don't want to keep some of that information private about me.
That's a great question. So we have a couple of things that we use to protect privacy. First, people can choose not to be listed in the system. So if, for example, you don't want any workers looking at your profile, but you want to be able to look at workers' profiles, you can just switch your profile to read not actively looking, which means you won't show up in the search interface and workers won't be able to look at your profile. We also have some tools to set further privacy capabilities. If, for example, you want to only show match questions if a worker is answering the same match questions that you are, or not show workers the support services you need, or otherwise customize what you do or don't show on the platform, you have that capability. And then finally, in each of the states we operate in, we offer this as an option, a choice. So nobody has to create a profile. If they do, though, they'll find a few different ways to protect their privacy and limit who gets to see access to the information they put there. It's a great question.
Hi, Ari. I have a question about, you said that you're marketing this for people who are elderly as well as people with more traditional lifelong disabilities. I'm thinking of my 82-year-old mother who's going through pancreatic cancer journey right now. She would not be able to manage this kind of computer tech-heavy application. Do you have a staffed phone line of somebody who can make entries for someone and read them profiles and help them work through the process so they get the value of the information sharing without having to be tech savvy?
We don't, but often that's something that our clients, who tend to be either agencies, health plans, or state entities, provide using our software. So basically, we create a back-end interface so that if, say, you're an agency that's supporting someone and you want to give them access to the system, you can step in and access their profile on their behalf and then look and see what they have in a particular geographic area and read to them over the phone that information. We also make it easy through the authorized user function for folks to give access to a family member to help them in that way. So, I mean, our role starts and stops with the technology, but we built into the technology the ability for our partner organizations to provide that kind of service.
You were sharing the questions. That's a new feature of the My Support, where people are able to respond and then show trends over time. I've been using kind of a similar app because we don't really self-direct from my grandma. It's just a free app online, and they have the same thing, but you're not able to show trends over time. But my question is, are those based on their ISP outcomes, or can you choose those, or are they just kind of pre-populated questions? Like, was John happy today? Or because the thing I want to know about my grandma is, did she have her door locked when you got there today? That's one of my number one concerns. So I would like the ability to be able to change those.
So we haven't deployed that feature yet, but our intent is to allow people to create their own questions and their own responses, as well as having a few preloaded ones that we find to be commonly useful in certain instances, say with people with co-occurring medical issues or epilepsy or dementia or other similar sets of issues. So the answer is, when we deploy this, we'll have a few available for people to choose from, and folks will be able to design their own.
Once again, my name is Dennis Carberry, and do you do this in Chicago?
Not as of yet. Currently, we are in New York, California, Iowa, and Virginia, and we're getting ready to launch in Maryland and Tennessee. But I can give you my card, and if there's an organization you think would be interested in talking with us in Chicago, we, of course, welcome the opportunity.
Also, do you have a website online on your business card?
We do. MySupport.com.
Well, very good.
Excellent.
Very good.
And the next convention is going to be in Nashville, Tennessee. Next United States Convention. The United States Convention is going to be in Nashville, Tennessee.
Ah, that'll be useful to know, especially when we're ready to deploy there. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We have a question in the back of the room, I think.
What kind of funding does it take to get this program into Colorado where it's useful? I like knowing about it, but since it's not very useful to me right now, it's very kind of hard to really say that can be useful to me. So how can we get this where it's available to everybody in every state?
That's an excellent question. So our pricing model is relatively straightforward. It's $30 a month per person with a disability on the platform. We don't charge people with disabilities or workers. We find that that's not really a sustainable model, A, because generally speaking, people with disabilities and direct support workers don't have the resources to pay, but B, because when we go into a state, we try and have a critical mass. So what that means is we're going to want to have somebody in the state that'll say, well, we've got 100 people or 1,000 people that might be interested in using this system. So that lets us know that there's an interest there. So what we would need to come to Colorado would be either a state or a state agency or a health plan or a fiscal intermediary. I think you may call them FMSs here. financial management services entities to contract with us to make this available, as we've seen entities contract with us in Virginia, New York, California, and Iowa.
Are any of those states PPL states?
Great question. So the question was, are any of those states PPL states? We are currently in the process of integrating with PPL in Virginia. Now, PPL is not our client in Virginia. Our client is Anthem, the managed care organization, but we're going to be integrating with PPL and in Virginia, and we're most likely going to be doing the same thing in Tennessee. Are you in a PPL state?
Missouri.
Okay, yeah. So we have that capability. PPL is usually not the payer, but PPL is often a partner, and what we do is we pull data from PPL systems on background checks, and we're now in the process of trying to integrate with them so they can pull data from our systems on timesheets, so folks can submit timesheets on the platform.
Because one of the things I hear in Missouri all the time is that people can't find the staff that they need in Missouri, and so this would be really great if Missouri decided to buy into this so that they could, because there's a lot of rural places in Missouri where there's no providers. So.
Well, we'd love to help you with that, and
Yeah,
I
give
can
me your
tell
card.
you.
I'll give it to Kyla.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering, especially in those rural areas, with one-stops and Voc Rehab to onboard job seekers into the system. So we try and make My Support kind of a common pool where different organizations that are supporting job seekers can refer them to opportunities in direct support work. I'll pass along my card afterwards, I guess. Okay.
You have a print card in Braille.
It's print as well. You look on the other side, it's print and Braille.
I'd like to get one with print, because I can't read the Braille.
They're all of them have print and Braille. I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, no, one more card. I'm sorry.
Oh, one more card.
Make that two.
Arizona doesn't have it, but it's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
Sneak one in for you.
Any final questions? Well, I'll close by saying we're very excited about the prospect of growing self-directed services. At the end of the day, everything that we all do, all of us in this room, is about improving the availability of choice and autonomy for people with disabilities. And we know that no model offers more choice and autonomy than self-directed services. Technology offers us a pathway to make that available for more people. And we look forward to partnering with many of you in this room to help fulfill that dream for all. Thank you so much, and thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.